Hi there, friends. Your pal Miles here, and welcome to ShoBooVie. Welcome back for those of you who checked out episode one. Welcome in general to those of you who maybe didn't check out episode one, in which case we probably need to have a conversation about how you disappointed me. But in the meantime, we'll cast that aside and we'll just jump right in. For those of you who aren't familiar with ShoBooVie, it's both a website that I created along with a web series. And the website kind of just dives into my three favorite forms of media: shows, books, and movies, hence the fancy portmanteau name and awesome logo that you see over here that my sister Deanna made. Plug Deanna. Deanna's awesome. But the web series is a little different because what I do is I take an example from each of those mediums and a show, a book, and a movie, and I tie them all in thematically and talk about how they unify via that theme. So, for example, if you take The Black Cat, short story by Edgar Allan Poe, you take the movie Pet Sematary. I know it's a book too, but like whatever, work with me here. And then you take Sabrina the Teenage Witch. All of those go to show you that all cats are evil, including the cat from Sabrina. I know you're probably going to say, like, he's so charming, like, blah, blah, blah. An evil cat, dude. I don't care what you say. All cats are evil. So that's just an example. So, and then the other thing about ShoBooVie, which you probably figured from me, spitting on myself a little bit so far, is that it's unedited. Events occur in real time, as Jack Bauer says, because I am repulsed by the idea of learning how to edit. And I'm also just too lazy to learn how to edit. So you're going to have to deal with me in real time here, potentially spitting on myself and stuttering and stuff, but you get the pure essence of Miles. It's the real me. So that should be exciting for you. But anyway, so last week on ShoBooVie, our theme was dystopias. We did Severance for TV shows, we did Wall-E for movies, and we did Brave New World for books. I think I said last week, it was actually last month. Whatever. I'm not going to do these every week. You guys are crazy if you think I can do that. But thanks for the confidence. Anyway, so this week's theme is going to be vampires. They've been a cultural heavyweight for like literally almost like 150 years. It's crazy how long these guys have been around for. You guys probably see some familiar faces here. You got Nick Cage doing crazy Dracula things. What We Do in the Shadows, Buffy, terrible Twilight. I don't care what kind of positivity it's getting in retrospect. It's a garbage series, whatever. Blade, underseen movies, so good. And then even the most recent release, Nosferatu. And the reason, my theory at least, of why vampires have been so relevant as long as they have is because they're able to be malleable in terms of being symbolic of a theme that's topical for a given era. So, for example, otherness. And what I mean by otherness is just a societal general fear of the other. And while I said it might be specific to an era, otherness sort of just covers a general sort of umbrella symbolism for vampires. No matter the era, vampires seem to go hand in hand with a fear of the other. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit today, with our show being HBO's True Blood, our book being the OG vampire story, Dracula, and our movie being the cult classic, The Lost Boys. And so, first things first, we're going to jump into Dracula, which I just read for the first time a few months ago. It's so good still, and it's so scary still. It's legitimately like still a very frightening book. It's like 100 years old, over 100 years old, and still just so good. And it's really cool to read because you can see where all of these like token vampire myth bits, like stakes in the heart and garlic and like all this stuff came from. It came from Dracula. And granted, Bram Stoker might have done some research and gathered stuff from like legends of yore to create the myth of Dracula, but I mean, his is like the ultimate myth. And in fact, you probably see our little homeboy Nosferatu here. For those of you who have seen the new one that came out last month, obviously that's a remake of a famous 1920s movie, which is actually an illegal adaptation of Dracula. So if you ever read the Dracula book and you've seen the recent or old or any iteration of Nosferatu, you're going to be like, oh, this is really similar. It's because it is a literal ripoff of Dracula. It's an amazing ripoff, very artistic ripoff, but nevertheless, it is a ripoff. So when it comes to otherness with Dracula, though, there's all sorts of theories, and Bram Stoker never quite like came out and said what he was trying to convey with it. There's some sexual stuff, there's some homoeroticism stuff going on with Dracula, but the faction of otherness that I wanted to talk about in regards to Dracula was xenophobia, which is basically the fear of, it translates to literally the fear of like aliens, but it's essentially the fear of immigrants in the case of Dracula. So basically, at the time when he was writing Dracula, this is in like the early 1900s, there was a fear of the decline of the British Empire and almost a reverse colonization, which is, as you know, us being little Americans, Britain was going all over the world just fucking stuff up, taking whatever they wanted, colonizing whatever, doing whatever they wanted to do. But there became a fear around the 1900s when colonization like sort of slowed down that England itself was becoming overrun by these other cultures, and they had accidentally introduced these other cultures and types of people into their society, and so there was a fear that the quote unquote purity of English society was being all mucked up by immigrants that were coming over. And so there's this theory, and it's not a very kind theory to Bram Stoker, but that Dracula, in essence, and everything he represents, all his vampirism and stuff, represents immigrants coming to feed on pure English society. And there's these sort of attributions that they give to Dracula. He's like animalistic. He's part man, part beast, and he has this like parasitic bloodlust and wants to like suck everything out of society that he can. And frankly, that's some pretty racist stuff, but that's what a lot of people thought at the time. And honestly, some people still do, unfortunately, about immigration and about the immigrants coming in to Europe or England, coming in to just suck all the goodness out of them and put all this filth and nastiness into their society. So that's where the fear of the other comes in Dracula. And as I said, there's this little dash of homosexuality in terms of their Dracula feeds on a lot of men. So some people think Bram Stoker's actually repressed homosexual too. But that takes me over to True Blood, though. Got that opening credit sequence playing over here. It's so good. It's so spooky. But anyway, so True Blood is made by Alan Ball, who also made 6 Feet Under, which is like a legendary HBO show that is just criminally underseen. You guys got to watch 6 Feet Under. It's so, so good. But anyway, so the premise of True Blood, if you haven't checked it out, is that vampires have always existed for a bajillion years. It's like the dawn of time or whatever. There are vampires in the show who were like thousands of years old. And it's at a point in society where vampires have come into light, if you will, and revealed themselves to society. And so you see a lot of the show where the vampires, the better ones, the nicer ones, are basically just like fighting for their rights. And a lot of people equate that with the fight for queer LGBTQ plus rights. Now, granted, creator Alan Ball says that he thinks that's like an oversimplification of the show. But, not to knock on Ball, but there's like some direct correlations to the homosexual civil rights movements, to the queer civil rights movement, and what they do in True Blood. Like, God Hates Fangs is literally in the opening credits of True Blood. There's also this whole phrase about coming out of the coffin when you're revealing to society that you're a vampire. And they also have this whole segment, or this whole faction of the church called the Fellowship of the Sun, which is basically just out to destroy vampires. It's got some pretty horrible, like, conversion therapy kind of parallels. But there's, as much as Ball might have been trying to avoid those comparisons, and he's right, you shouldn't boil down the show to just that, because it does tackle some other things like drug addiction. But there is a huge queer civil rights narrative in True Blood. And I brought up that example of coming out of the coffin, so I wanted to show you guys this next clip of one of the show's characters, Jessica, after she's been turned into a vampire, essentially coming out as a vampire to her parents. And unfortunately, it is somewhat similar to what a lot of people deal with when they come out as queer to their family.
Front door.
How could you do this?
Patty.
Do you have any idea what you put your mother through? Why, Jessica? You tell me why!
Mr. Hamby!
Or I will make you tell me!
Go ahead, Daddy. Get your belt. But this time, I'll be ready for you.
How could you let some bloodsucker bite you like that?
Mr. Hamby didn't let anybody do anything to me. But oh, am I glad he did. Because now I get to homeschool you in what it's like to be scared. Jessica, stop! Jesus Christ, so you need to shut the fuck up! Are you okay? Baby, please. This isn't you. You don't know the first thing about me. You're too dumb to know anything. Jessica!
That's probably all we need to watch here. And obviously, a girl revealing herself as a vampire isn't the same as, someone coming out as queer to their family. And I think that's what Alan Ball was trying to say is like, don't compare vampires to queer people and vice versa. But that's like obvious. We know that that's not the case. But anyway, you can definitely see some parallels there where, her parents say something like, how could you let this happen? Or, this isn't you, just like a general lack of acceptance. And so here you can see a pretty good example of where True Blood is showing those parallels between the struggle of being queer and being accepted by a society who deems you as an other. So now, I've had some trouble with this transition here, so let's see if we can get over. Nice, we made it. All right, cool. So, our last bit that we're going to do here, our last other that we're going to dive into, is in the movie The Lost Boys, which is a total cult classic. If you haven't seen it, it's tons of fun. It's a freaking blast. It's probably like one of the, if you actually look at like the scope of like vampire cinema, there really aren't that many like banger movies. It's kind of crazy. The Lost Boys may be like the most entertaining vampire movie. It's awesome. Directed by Joel Schumacher, R.I.P. But basically, Lost Boys is you have a family who, you have a mom who moves out to California with her two sons after a nasty divorce, and the sons get involved with some shady figures who are the titular Lost Boys, who also happen to be vampires. And so we look at the other in this case, and it's a bit of a twist because, with the first one with the first two, we had some social issues, immigration, queer rights. But with the Lost Boys, the other in this regard, that you can see Kiefer Sutherland, the young and hip Kiefer Sutherland here, and his brothers representing here, is actually just like youth and teenagers. Lost Boys came out in 1987, and at the time there was just this general fear of like what was your teenager doing? And for a teenager on the other side of things, you like didn't feel understood, as every teenager since the dawn of time like ever has. But this was like reaching a fever pitch at the time, and that's actually one of the things that inspired the folks who made the movie to make the movie, is this like contemporary youth disconnect that was going on at the time. And if you look at the Lost Boys, if you look at Kiefer and the boys up here, they kind of represent like everything that like an adult fears about what their child may become. They're kind of like androgynous. They like don't fit a clear-cut gender. Scary. They're they're wearing all their like hardcore leather stuff. They're riding around on motorcycles. Scary. They're also vampires, so that's scary. But basically they represent that like rebellion, totally unsupervised, do what you will, just feckless abandon that parents were really afraid that their teenagers were living or would want to live. And on the other side of things, while the Lost Boys are definitely personified as villains, they have that temptation towards the film's protagonists, those two brothers, to like basically lure them into their lifestyle. And they're like, we are free. Kiefer Sutherland says that a few times. It's like, if you want freedom, come with us, because we don't have to deal with anything. We're doing our own thing. And so there's almost that like allure of being that freewheeling teenager too in the Lost Boys. So basically, the Lost Boys represent that rift when it comes to otherness between being a teenager and being understood by your parents, basically. And if you think, a lot of people would see the Lost Boys and be like, you're maybe overthinking this a little bit, Miles, but there's actually a lot of literature on it online, and you don't even need to go read and all that. You can see it in the opening credit sequence of The Lost Boys, which I'm going to play for you now, to the tune of The Doors. Great song. I'm going to play a little more, but I don't know if you've noticed so far, but everyone that they showed while they play the song People Are Strange are like teenagers. They're all youths and like adolescents, and they're all like grungy and going through their own things or whatever. So this song is literally telling you right off the bat, like the theme of the movie, but people don't even like buy into it necessarily. They're just like, oh, the Doors, like, oh. But this is literally showing you right off the cuff here that sort of alienation. We'll play a little more because the Doors are awesome. When you stray, no one remembers your name. When you stray, when you stray, you're strange. People are strange when you're a stranger. Mom, yeah, I mean, is there any song that like personifies being a teenager better than this song? You know, it says like, uh, faces look ugly when you're alone. When you're unwanted. So it's all that good stuff. So you have that. So I feel like this scene in particular really shows that theme of the Lost Boys in terms of otherness, and helps us put a little bow on this whole ShoBooVie episode here. Oh, I messed up my transition. I was scared to do that. All right, here we go. Okay, so that's episode 2, much shorter than episode 1 by like 10 minutes or something. So I hope you enjoyed this one. It was a bit, it was conjured by Nosferatu a little bit. Thought I'd do something fun, and reading Dracula, which, like I said, is just sick. So definitely recommend you check that out. But in the interim, go ahead and give me a little follow. Got everything listed here. You can hop on the website, ShoBooVie.com. You can follow me at the gram, at ShoBooVie. You can go ahead and find me on Facebook. Hit me up, subscribe. Feel free to comment on this bad boy. I'm a little torn on what episode 3 is going to be. I'm thinking of having it be about beauty and how society deems beauty and how people kind of suffer under that. I'm thinking about it being about magical realism and how that ties into certain societal struggles. So let me know what you're thinking. Maybe those are my front runners, I think. Oh, also greed and like the American dream. So those are my 3: American dream, magical realism, and beauty. So let me know if any of those sound interesting to you. But I hope all of this was interesting to you. Hope you had a good time. Thanks for watching for the whole shebang here. And I love you. Thanks, guys. See you till next time. See ya till next time. See ya next time. There you go.